What state comes to mind when you think about the word bourbon? It has to be Kentucky, right? 95% of, if not more, of the world's bourbon comes from Kentucky. And while Kentucky is the originator and they are the best at it, there are still a lot of other states that are starting to produce some very good whiskey and some very good bourbon. Two that come to mind for me: Texas and Colorado really starting to hit the scenes. And in this episode, we're going to talk to one of those Colorado distilleries. Law's Whiskey House is joining me here in the Spinner Speakeasy. Welcome into the WHISKEYWEATHER YouTube channel, everybody. I am Brandon Spinner. I'm a TV meteorologist in Northern Kentucky and Southwest Ohio, working in Cincinnati. And this is my forecasting channel about forecasting the latest trends and tastes in the whiskey world and what's going on out there. As far as this interview, we're going to be talking to Al Laws from Law's Whiskey House in Denver, Colorado. But before we jump into that interview, I want to ask you, what distillery or what craft distillery would you like to hear from, or would you like me to talk to next? Drop that in the comments below, and I'll see if I can reach out and get them booked in here on the WHISKEYWEATHER YouTube channel. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button below as well. And now I welcome in Alan Laws. You may know him as Al Laws from Law's Whiskey House, the founder and president. Al, good to have you here today. First question I'm always going to ask as a meteorologist: what's the weather like that out there by you?
It's a great day here, Brandon. It's going to be about 55, and there's a nice kind of warm wind. There's no snow left. It's starting to feel like a little bit like spring.
Yeah, awesome. That means that whiskey is going in and out of the barrels a little more now, right? Get a little bit more warmth.
Yeah, we get the warmth, obviously, the summer is obviously the time when they're most active, but we run heated warehouses, so they never really are sleeping. Okay. And then awesome. We have the added benefit we have is the barometric pressure swings here, which you will be well aware of what that is, makes our barrels pump like a heart, right? Because we have erratic moves in them. So, the barrels are, they breathe, but they're highly restricted in how they breathe. Yeah. And when the pressures change, forces the whiskey into the wood. And then when it drops, it pulls it out. And so we have that kind of cycle that's always with us here on the Front Range in Colorado, in Denver.
Yeah, especially Colorado being so much different than Kentucky, not just weather-wise, but you mentioned pressure-wise. But I've read on your website that it's not just the weather in the barrel, but also with the grains itself. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So what happens is we use only Colorado grain. So the small grains are all heirloom varietals. There's a big word. And then the corn is like heritage corn. So all these things are grown somewhere, obviously. All our small grains come from Alamosa in the San Luis Valley. And this is a particularly good place to grow high quality grain. A lot of the barley grown for like Coors and some breweries is grown there. So the climate conditions in that area are great for this. It's about 7,600 feet above sea level. So it's high up, and it's in the mountain valley, and it used to be an ancient seabed. So the character of the dirt is part of what makes the grains taste great. So they're a varietal, plus then there's the terroir of the dirt and the weather conditions around it. And, we're getting hot summer days and then colder nights, and then stress conditions on the grain because the water table is only about 4 feet down, and it's high salinity and a lot of sand. And so it rips through. So the grain's got to struggle, or the plant's got to struggle, which makes the grain better. So all these are grown for flavors, not for yield. Yeah. So it's a big deal. Like the weather definitely makes a difference. It's very dry here, as you probably know, and so it's a perfect conditions in that valley for. Again, we get our rye from there, we get our barley, and we get our wheat from there.
So why go with 4 grains?
Well, we're making traditional American whiskey, and there's this state in the country that makes the best, for American whiskeys in Kentucky. So we want to add to that fabric of American whiskey. And we thought, well, it would be great if, I like wheated bourbons, I like rye bourbons. It would be really great if we could make something that had all 4 American mother grains in it, which wasn't very prominent when we started. I think it's a category now, but that's just, I see that. I see it a lot more in the market. And we started out just that way. So we wanted to make sure that every sip you got some of those grains. So in our 4-grain, it starts with this, sweetness of the corn, and then follows by like a penny metallic bite kind of thing, which is the rye. Mm-hmm. And then this kind of cool doughy orange cinnamon bun thing, which is the wheat. And then finally it finishes really cool with this nuttiness, and it's like walnuts, hazelnuts, and a dry, very dry. And all those in every sip of our, award-winning 4-grain bourbon, you get all that. So we've made wheated bourbon too. We have some of that, and we made rye bourbon, and we still just like the 4-grain as something differentiated, again, adding to the backdrop of American whiskey and American bourbon.
Yeah. So what started your love for whiskey? Like what got you into it? Everybody's got their own story. Would love to know, as the founder of a whiskey brand, what got you all into it?
Well, I could tell you that I was passionate about whiskey. That would be a lie, because that word is not strong enough.
Yeah.
I would use the term obsessed.
Okay.
And I started drinking whiskey very young. Now, I always temper this. Like, I grew up in Canada, so it's a little more liberal. But like I started drinking whiskey when I was 16, and Jack Daniels was a very good friend. And Wild Turkey, those two are like probably my favorites. And that's what I didn't drink beer. Like my friends and stuff like that, or wine. I don't really like either of those. So I just started with whiskey, and that's been with me my whole life. It's a contemplative spirit. I think it's the highest evolved spirit, and you get to, slow down the world when you drink whiskey, and it's typically not done alone.
Yeah, right.
So
usually,
so it's a social thing, and it just slows the world down. And we have such a fast-paced world today that I think it's a necessary thing. But so it started then, and as we went through the years, I tried different things, and I used to have 700 different whiskeys in my house. Now, post-COVID, that's way down. So I think there's only a couple hundred now, but everything from Irish whiskey, Scotch. I really like bourbon's my favorite, and then American rye I think is my second favorite. And we just start to, like a fan, you just sort of like trip your way through this, and then you start to discover that, well, this is really interesting. This is different from this one, and what do I like? I like this one. So when it comes down to, fast forward 30 or so years, it's like, well, could you make a bourbon that has all these cool elements of other whiskeys that you like? And the answer is yes. So our goalposts when we started out to make our 4-grain and to make Law's whiskey in general, with my Yoda, Bill Friel, who master distiller for a long time. He finished his career in Barton's. He's 89 now, but he's a great guy for me. Taught me how to add the soul to it. But our targets were to be really approachable. And that's what our 4-grain, even at 95 proof, it's still really approachable. And that's what, to me, in bourbon, that's like maker's mark, right? So easy to drink, beautifully constructed. So that was the first goalpost. And the second goalpost was to have layered complexity. So 4-grains will give you some of that layered complexity for sure, but it's also technique and a few other things. But I wanted it to be more, because we're lower corn, we're only 60% corn, something like Four Roses single barrel. Like a lot of those are in that, 60, 65% corn range. So those were the goalposts, and that's where I think we fall when we get to when you get them side by side. And I can see where this 4-grain Law's bourbon falls between these as our target. So it took us not too long, because Bill was expert at this. So that helped. Yeah. People often ask me like, oh well, how would you have confidence that after so many years it would be good? I'm like, well, they have this guy.
Yeah.
And and he was great to work with, because he never answered any question. He just asked you more questions.
Yeah. So you started drinking at 16, but when did you start dreaming or thinking and developing the Law's Whiskey House brand and putting it all together? I know you started in 2011, but I'm sure it started well before that.
Yes, that's a great question. So we've been doing this for almost 13 years. In July 4th, it'll be 13 years at exactly how long we've been making it. But before that, I come from research analyst in finance. So oil and gas research analyst, you tend not to, nothing's by chance. You overdo everything. So I spent about 5 years prior to that reading everything I could find. And remember, 13 years out of the 18 years ago, there wasn't a lot of stuff out there. There was virtually nothing. And just so I'd read like fluffy kind of like, look at the fields in Scotland and all, you know, those kind of books. And then, you know, some technical manuals I managed to find, and they were, you know, pretty dry. And then, you know, there's a few cool books by like Cowdery and things like that that talked about, you know, American whiskey in particular. And those were great guides early on. But it took, you know, 5 years. Then you financially model it. You look at, you know, where would you want to do this? How much does it cost? And at the time, we lived in Brooklyn, New York, and we were looking around, you know, how would it cost? Where would we do this? And then got transferred out here, which was easy move for me because I grew up in Alberta, Canada.
Yeah.
Calgary is exactly like Denver.
Yeah.
So it was an easy thing. And then here we could own the building that we started in, which was a big deal because then, you know, if we didn't, we had marijuana become legal 2 or 3 years after we started, and then we would have lost our lease for sure. So it was good to own where we came from. But you know, it took a lot of research and try to read everything and try to understand. Like for instance, I bought like 10 years of back issues of Malt Advocate.
Oh wow!
I read every one of them because you get to see the trends in the business, and then, you know, 2 or 3 years into this for us, like American whiskey took off, and so we're pretty lucky. It's lucky, and then there's a curse to it as well. But this journey for us to start out, you know, 5 years research, we've been doing it for 13. We thought this was like a 20-year journey to establish a brand, and so we're just over halfway. It takes a long time, takes a lot of patience. If you're going to do it right, in my opinion, that's, you know, making your own stuff, not sourcing it, and you know, that's a different business model. It's just not our business model.
Right. And that's what I loved about your business model is for 3 years, you sat on it and you didn't sell anything, and you're selling everything that is solely yours. And you don't know this, but I actually talked about you guys in one of my latest videos that our viewers can watch. It's just a link right above Al's head. You were on my 5 craft distilleries that I wanted to try in 2024. And ironically, that exact day, Emily reached out to me, not even knowing. But
that's crazy. I did see that, by the way.
Yeah, you did? Well, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. But so the fact that 3 years, what did you do for those 3 years? A lot of people source and sell until everything is aged and matured. What was the struggle like with that? And how did you handle that?
Well, it's cost a lot of money.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, the age old, you know, how do you make a small amount of money in whiskey? Is you start with a lot of money. That's true. We just made whiskey. So, and then we worked on things like the branding. Like nothing happens by accident at Law's Whiskey House. It's you know, like we spent a lot of time on everything. So the bottle design, the branding kind of feel to it, this Craftsman era kind of stuff. And so that's what we did during the time. By the time we actually put stuff in glass and sold it, it was like 3.5 years in, I think. We had like 800 barrels laid down.
Oh, wow.
Like for a little company, when you see a lot of us around the country, that's a lot of stuff. And the idea behind that was, it wasn't just 4 grain. So we'd made rye soon after, and we'd made wheat whiskey as well. And I'll tell you a story on that. Like, so we make a 4 grain.
Yep.
All cooked together. We're cooking it at temperatures where it maximizes those grain flavors. And then we made adjustments to that because some of the grains are a little bit of a bully, like they'll take over the flavor profile. Yeah. And then we wanted to like deconstruct that to give people a flavor experience that is related to, hey, we're making something out of grain. Yeah, there we go. There's a perfect example of it. So we wanted to make something as close to 100% of that grain as possible. Same technique, same yeast, same equipment, all sour mash. And that's what we started doing. So we laid down a lot of barrels so that we had, the term I use is option value. So we did it all with cash because we had the cash. I wish I had that cash now.
Yeah.
But so
It's
it
coming.
allowed
It's
us
coming.
to not compromise, right? So we didn't
Yeah.
have to. We're not selling gin or vodka, and it's not because I think poorly of those things. It's just like, if I don't love, or if you don't love what you're making, you shouldn't be making,
Right.
in my opinion. So it has that kind of feel to it, that kind of Ayn Rand feel to us. There are no shortcuts, all these kind of things. Is like, well, we don't like that stuff. That's not what we want to make. So we weren't going to do that. So we were going to use this cash to do, luckily I have my partner and wife was okay with it. So we spent all of our money building this. So she was okay with it, which sometimes that probably doesn't work out. But
I understand.
So we spent a lot of time. So we had a lot of things to look at when we were ready. We thought we were ready because of other brands in our area, and at 2.5 you'll have something. And I'm pretty hypercritical about whiskey and not just like what I like and what I didn't. And so it wasn't ready. And we're like, well, this isn't good, because we sort of had planned that we would have a small amount of revenue now, but so we had to wait another almost a year. But then it was ready.
But it was worth it.
Yeah,
right?
It definitely. Like, again, there's the ideas that you don't compromise, and the ideas that you don't take shortcuts. And we wanted to do this the right way. The reason that Bill, my Yoda, wanted to help us was because he's like, "Are you going to do it the right way, son?" And I said, "Yeah, this is how we're going to do it." He's not going to change halfway through. And I'm like, "No, we're not. We're going to stick to this." And we have stuck to this in over our 13 years. We don't chase stuff like, "Oh, hey, this is the cool thing to do." We don't do that. We we layer stuff in. Everything that we do is well thought out. Everything that anyone wants to try in our teams is like, well, what's the null hypothesis?
Yep.
What are we trying for? And how are we going to commit resources to this? So, and everyone's on board with that. And it's very much a team effort. It isn't just me, for sure.
It takes a lot of conviction after having a plan and then having to kind of pivot and be like, all right, it's not ready. 3.5 is what we're going for now. So I'm sure that was were tough conversations and tough decisions.
They definitely were. And it's like, over 13 years, a lot of stuff's changed. It's like, it's mind blowing in some level of where we were and what we knew at that time versus what we know now. And it's, there's making it, which is hard. And then there's selling it, which is even harder.
Yeah.
Which is
you can imagine
a whole thing. And this whole business is very peculiar in that regard. And how do you get it on a shelf, and how do you support, like, getting it to move off the shelf? And it's, I know, it's quite the journey.
Go for it. So you're 36 different states, I think I saw right now. Are there plans to continue to try to get to all 50?
Yeah, the 36 would be through the e-com thing. So we're really, I would say we're in 14 or 15, and then I would cut that in half to like 7, where we put a lot of effort. We spend a lot of time on our home state, where we want to own where we're from there as well. And we are, very proud to be from Colorado. And I think that, we continue to make investments to grow the brand in Colorado. And it's we do well against even national brands here. Yeah. And so we want to keep that and grow that. So those are, the focuses are, in bigger markets, these are pretty easy, like where there's a lot of people. Yeah. Big surprise, right? So like California and Texas are pretty good for us. And then Illinois is becoming,
that's where I grew up.
It's a tough market. It's a very competitive market. And we've been there for a long time, and it takes a long time to kind of break in and grind it out. And it's going quite well now, I think. And I think we're in a kind of a takeoff point, I think, in Illinois, even with a challenging backdrop. 23 was challenging. This year will be challenging, as we're all regressing out of the COVID super boom, or whatever they want to call it in the press. So it's been different.
So you mentioned Colorado and owning your state. What I also love is Bottle and Bond bourbon. It's probably my go-to. If I had to pick something to drink all the time, it would be a Bottle and Bond. And you guys were the first Colorado distillery to put out a Bottle and Bond. So what did it mean to be the first for you? Like, how special was that?
Well, again, like we laid down a lot of things so that we could do this because I'm a whiskey geek and
Hmm.
I think it means something. And as the, Bottle and Bond Act, 1897, first consumer protection law ever in the United States,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. And is the Bottle and Bond Act enforced today? Well, if you say it's bonded, it has to meet those things, but it's not as prevalent as it was back then when somebody
Right.
had a gun and locks, and you had to to get it out of the out of the rick house. It was a little more I don't know, a little more involved, we'll say.
Yes.
But it's an important thing because it's the highest whiskey standard in the world. Like,
Yeah.
Scotch whiskey has its standard. This is a little bit higher, so it's straight whiskey standards in the United States, which are, I think, the gold standard. And then this is above that. And in order to do that, right, it's a single season, which is the biggest part of this whole thing, in my opinion,
Right.
because we only make our own stuff. So it's pretty easy for us to hit the second part of that, which is,
Yeah.
has to be made in one distillery. That's pretty easy for us. But the single seasons are January to June and then July to December. So everything had to be made in one of those seasons. And then we've even done this, again, more geeky than necessary. I don't think we're going to do it this year, but like where we release our 8-year bonded bourbon, 4-grain bourbon, and we have 2 parts to it. One's a fall, one's a summer, and so you can kind of get into that. That's harder than it might seem, but to do that. But it's cool to us because if the whiskey goes in the spring, or say it goes in now, it's going to have a hot season coming up pretty quickly. Whereas it goes in the fall, it's got to wait quite a while. So it changes the character of it slightly. And I know, like Kentucky used to be like, how many summers did a barrel see? That was the key thing. And I believe in that. But those 2 things are the first part of the Bottle and Bond Act. Has to be in a bonded warehouse. Well, everyone has a bonded warehouse. So otherwise you wouldn't be able to lay it there. Like you have to designate all those areas. It's important. And has to be in the bottle at 100 proof. So these things are tough, right? So if you're a really big company, even I'd say the company that's best at this is probably Heaven Hill. Like they care about bottle bond more than anybody, and so
half their product is right.
It's so good. Yeah, they're like I don't even know, over 10 different iterations of various bonded whiskeys. We have about 6 or 7. We make bonded corn whiskey. We make bonded wheat. We had bonded malt whiskey too. So we believe in this, and it's our high end. That's what we aspire to when we like. Here's our flagship stuff, which we think is awesome, and then our high end will always be like a bonded. So it's important to us. Again, if it's bonded, you made it. That's a pretty big flag to plant in the ground, right?
Yeah.
To us, that's really important. So. But we started out thinking about this from the beginning. We need to make that. And then our first bonded whiskeys were 4 years old.
Yeah.
Then we moved to 6. Now we're 7 and 8. I think this year the bonded bourbon will be 7. We like those barrels better, and we're going for. I say the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis this year was like, let's make it a little bit brighter, and let's make it. Let's go for some like corny sour mash finish. And that's what those are the barrels we picked. So awesome. Always purposeful. We want it to be different every year. It's fun. That's one of the most fun projects every year. So that's in a tank. That's in the tank right now, actually. And then you're followed by rye in a couple weeks. And then the wheat would be sometime in April. We'll put that in tank.
That's sweet. And speaking of April, I know that was the goal. You guys are building a new tasting room at the distillery out there in Denver. Tell me about the tasting room. Whiskey Church, right? Basically, is how you brand it. Yeah.
So we've had a small bottle shop tasting room in the distillery for quite a while. Well, since we opened, since we went into the market. So, almost 10 years ago. But it's pretty small, and it's not really made to have a brand interaction.
Yeah.
So we wanted to create something that met our brand standards and a destination for if you come to Denver, a cool cocktail bar in it, and an education center. And the education center has like a church, so a place to come and pay homage to whiskey and to recognize it in all its different levels. So it has a big arched Gothic window in it and pews, and it's pretty cool. We're 85% done. So next few months we should be able to open. It's been a long, long, long journey to get here, but COVID and all those things didn't help us. Get the construction done fast. We'll put it that way.
I totally understand that. You got a tattoo, I understand, on your forearm, right? What does it say, and what's the meaning for you?
Well, it's just part of how we run, how our culture runs at the distillery. It's like we are a team. It's a village, and what's core to us is that we don't take shortcuts. Whiskey's about time. Like even our logo is, infinity crossed by process, essentially. Like do something 1,000 times, get better at it, continuous improvement. And it's where continuous improvement crosses time is what Toss whiskey is. So we don't want to take shortcuts on time. We're not interested in cutting years off of it. We want to embrace that. And it's on our wall, like that same phrase is on the wall in the distillery, and it's a little overbearing at some point, but like it's pretty big, and people understand that this is who we are, and the culture is like team. And if you run the equipment, you are the head distiller. So we don't have a master distiller or anything like that. We run it like again, Canadian hockey team is like how I would describe it.
Yeah,
and it's a great team environment where everyone has a say, and we collaborate on making sure that what we're making is the best, or if we want to try something different, that we go through it in the same no shortcuts methodology. So it's part of like that. It's our mantra, if you will. Some of our other mantras are like craft over commodity, quality over quantity, and whiskey above all. That's our corporate mantra. And then no shortcuts is pretty important to everyone in the village.
You're doing it the right way, and it's clear it's coming through. Really enjoy everything that I've tried. I've got the Bottle and Bond bourbon, the Bottle and Bond rye, and then the cognac finish. In the Foeder. Is that how you say it? Foeder?
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce that?
That's exactly how you pronounce
it. Explain the process of that and how you came, because is cognac the only finish that you do?
Oh no.
No.
But it's the one that we wanted to take to the next level. So, and this has got a cool story to it. So we wanted to start to try finishes. This is quite a few years ago. Again, no hypothesis. Well, why are we going to get this finishing barrel? What is it adding to the base spirit? What are we going for? Always part of this stuff. So we tried a bunch of different things at the beginning, like port, even a white port. Armagnac is one of our favorites, cognac. And we got all these barrels in, and we just do like one, because we're doing this. We're putting like 3-year-old whiskey that is close to being able to be into some other vessel for a period of time. And what if we wreck it? We haven't done this before. We're like, let's try this. So we were pretty nervous, but when we did it, we're like, okay, we're pretty excited. So cognac was one of the first ones. And so it's in there, and you're like trying it every, couple weeks. And we know what we're looking for, but we're nervous about it going too long. And we timed out about 6 months, and that was our first one. We come out, and there's only a barrel of it, but they're pretty big barrels. So we had enough, and we sold, and it went really well. So we're like, people really like the cognac one. We did some rum finish ones and all that, but the cognac one people really liked a lot. So we're like, okay, well, let's do the next step here. And then the next step was to let it sit for over a year. That was better because it allowed for more integration, and so you could, on the 6-month one, you got the elements of this. So you can, it's there, but it sort of stood out. Like it was a little rougher, I guess I would describe it as. It wasn't fully integrated. At a year, it's nicely integrated. So it's subtle. And I think we learned that. We're like, oh, wow, this is really good. It's subtle. This is what we're looking for. Then we were sitting around one night and like, you know what? We like Armagnac. We like cognac. Like I probably have, a bottle of Armagnac sitting there right now. And we're like, hey, Armagnac is like what we do. Armagnac's like the whiskey of France, even though it's brandy. but it's like, hey, it's vintage year, single pass, all these kind of stuff. But cognac is not that. Cognac is about blending and blending again and crossing this and doing. It's about getting to that perfect state, but it's done slowly and iteratively, and again, layers and layers of this. And we're like, we got to pay homage to that in some way. So how would we do this? And the idea was, okay, well, why don't we do it this way? Let's do a number of series of our 4-grain in cognac casks, and then layer them on top of each other. And like, okay, this one's a year, this one's a year and a half, and we kind of work on it that way. And that was how we started. Okay, well, then we'll put it in a bigger vessel, and then it's like, well, we put it in stainless steel. That's pretty. It's not still alive at that point. It's just sort of like cold and sanitary and all these other things. We're like, that doesn't really fall. But we're like, well, they use all these blending tanks in France, and that allows it to integrate, and it's still breathing while it's getting to know each other, all these layers. So we were able to find through a good friend who sources barrels out of France from Vicard, and we got one of these. It's like 16 hectoliters, like 1,600 gallons, something like that. And this thing was old, like 50 years old, been used forever, it's being retired. French oak, very cool. We got it here, and this was going to be our thing. So we were going to take the 4-grain, have like fresh cognac barrels, sit it in there for a year, and then put them all into the foeder and let them continue to integrate and continue to be there. And then once it's full, pull off about 40% every year and then refill it. So you get a modified Solera process. And I'm like, this pays homage to cognac. So that's where we landed. And it took us we don't have a lot. So we're so small. It took us like 2 years to fill the foeder. It just took a long time. And then we're like, okay, now we let it sit for a year by all integrated. And then we started with round 1, first release. We're now, this year will be the 4th release, and it keeps changing, and it's awesome. So we're getting different cognac barrels too. And so you're layering in on top of this, and still 60% of it is what was there. And it's, beginning it was probably just under 4 years old as an average. Now it's probably closer to 5, but it's hard. You can't even come up with a date on it. And again, that's perfect because they don't have those dates on cognac either.
So it's basically a big infinity barrel, basically.
It is. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's like your infinity bottle or whatever. It's that. But it's all related to this. So it's a methodical thing. Like right now, so next month, we will top it up. So we have probably 25 barrels aging cognac barrels aging, and a lot of them are over a year. So we'll top up what the Angels drink since we last filled it on our harvest date back in October. So, and then we'll be ready for the fall again. But it's a really fun project, and every year we get even more accolades for it, and also get people like dive into it, and people that appreciate the effort that's going into it, and recognize that it's like a living thing almost, right?
Yeah. It's really cool. You do a fantastic job. It's very unique. I really enjoyed that. And you mentioned accolades. You just came off a couple of this past weekend. So congratulations. Yeah. Can you explain what you got, and for everybody out there, what it means to you?
Well, so we participate in the World Whiskey Awards, which is done by Whiskey Magazine, American Whiskey Magazine, every year. They do a good job. We've done it for a long time, and we've had some good success on things, like we win a category or a small category, or we get mentioned or something, which is cool. We get to see, because it's done blind, and we're up against not just American producers, but also international producers in the end too. So in 2017, we won World's Best Rye for our bonded 4-year-old rye. Like, that was insane. We're like, what? And from that point forward, we've won a number of other things for rye as well. But as you mentioned from the onset, like, we make a 4-grain bourbon. Winning in a bourbon category that's different from what everyone knows and loves to be bourbon, or defining that. Ours is, because of how it's made, and it's slightly different. So it takes a little bit to get maybe in the category it's tougher. So we haven't really won anything in the bourbon category, even though we do enter it. This year we've won the non-Kentucky best small batch bourbon in the U.S. And then followed an hour later, we won the world category. So that was pretty cool to us. Like we were like, wow, this is great. We were so happy with this. And then the world thing was very unexpected because, again, we're going against Four Roses. Right. And so that we're pretty proud of that. And we're very happy with that because it says to us that like people are starting to look beyond what the definition of American whiskey has been.
Right.
And I'm a big believer that when you look at Scotland, there's lowlands, there's Speyside, there's islands, there's highlands, there's Orkney, and they all have like their very differentiated type flavors, right? From the regions. I think that's happening in the United States. And, even though 95+% of American whiskey is still made in Kentucky and Tennessee, it's expanding. And I think there's more people looking outside of that, not because they don't like that. I think, we're just we're a relative of that traditional style and everything else. But I think you're starting to look at, Texas whiskey, Colorado whiskey, and these are just the big categories. Now we get down into bourbon and rye, or New York, upstate New York, or Minnesota, or Indiana. Like there's different whiskeys being made, and they have their own characteristics, which is really cool. And we felt that, maybe this is the first recognition of that. We took it that way anyways.
Yeah. Oh no, I would too. And it puts you guys even more on the map, right? You're beating these big brands, not just the ones in your state, but the ones that are nationally known. You mentioned Four Roses multiple times, and to beat them, I'm assuming that just had to you had to be smiling ear to ear.
Like I said, it was very shocking. And it's really cool for us because it allows us something to talk about. Everyone always, all the distributors, how do we introduce your whiskey and this, and it's always like, okay, well, we told you how to do that, but this is like world's best small batch. How about you start now?
Yep. That's easy. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Colorado a couple times. I want to circle back to the weather in Colorado because this is whiskey weather, right? And we got to talk about the weather. But it's not just the growing or the aging. I read something where you mentioned distilling the weather has an impact on too, which is not even something that I would have thought of. But how did the weather impact distilling for the first time for you?
Well, first of all, we only use pot stills. So we're not running a column still. And so there's PSI at top column, and it's 2-3% or 2 to 3 PSI. If you have a high pressure system come in, you put a lot more pressure on that, and it takes longer. So and it's always the day that you want to get out of there early, always the day. So it makes the run extend, and it's just really interesting. We didn't, why is this run taking so long? It's supposed to take 8 hours, and now it's like we're on 9 and it ain't even close to being done yet. And then you realize, well, big high pressure system, and it's affecting the pressures at top column, and it's just really interesting. There's so many things like that we've learned over the years that it just, you're like, wow, it's so strange. It can affect fermentation too, but the pressure systems move so quickly through here that that doesn't really show up in extra time on fermentation, but definitely on a spirit run, like slow and it can extend it by quite a bit. But weather matters. It's part of the terroir, and we believe in grain terroir. And we cut our spirit to go into barrels with mineral water from El Dorado Springs. We like the mouthfeel of it. We think it improves the mouthfeel even after 3 or 4 years. It's in there. It's part of the state. And that's what we're,
awesome.
I think that whiskey comes from somewhere, and that really distinguishes it. Again, go back to Scotland, because it comes from this area, and this is how they make it, and this is their all those things matter.
Yeah, that's awesome. Last question I have for you. If someone hasn't tried Law's Whiskey House and Law's Bourbon, Rye, whatever it is, what is the one thing that you would want them to try first?
Oh, the 4-grain. No question. Yeah. Now, that's what I would say. The rest of the village may not say that. A lot of them are going to say the rye. There's nothing else like the rye in the whole country. There's no rye like this. That's what a lot of our villagers would say. Like we, if you've worked full-time employee at Law's for over 5 years, you get a barrel.
Oh, wow.
And almost everybody picks a rye barrel.
Yeah.
So
that's sweet.
So I would say the bourbon. Though. I like it because I think it's what we set out to create.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that journey. Like we're really trying to present to you America's mother grains. And whiskey's about the grain more so than the barrel to me. And so our flagships are in that nothing less than like 3.5 years in it, and we put some 10-year in it too. And but we don't want to lose the kind of fruity notes, the green notes that we really like, esters that get covered over when it's been in the barrel for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so we like that front end because again, grain is what this is about. And we want the wood to accentuate it, not overpower it. And we have 10-year-old, we have some 12-year-old that we sell in the tasting room, and it's big. And it's more close to what traditionally you would think of Kentucky bourbon whiskey because it has more barrel influence on it. Mm-hmm. So we like it, somewhere between 4 and 7 years is kind of where we like it the best. Well, and that's awesome. All personal taste. Like this is all part of this. But I think the 4-grain allows you, it's a bigger whiskey in proof, but it's very approachable and you definitely get the layered complexity. And, by the 4th sip, it's different. We pick up different notes than you get. We have some kind of black tea and orange notes that are very prevalent in ours that I think.
Yeah, I pull a lot of citrus off of it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. And that's from the grain. So
yeah. Speaking of that, I will put a link in the description and in the comments for anybody watching who's interested in buying a bottle right off of your website. So anybody watching, that's where you can find that through the description link below. Al, it's been awesome to have you on Whiskey Weather YouTube channel. Non-weather, non-whiskey related question. You're from Canada. I'm assuming you like hockey. You've made the hockey reference multiple times regarding your team.
Yes.
I'm assuming I know who your team is, but
you may not.
Who's your hockey team?
So it's a pretty big deal in our house. So we watch hockey every night. We watched 2 games last night. Like it's basically what's on. So we watched we watched the Bruins game and the Caps game last night. So Bruins are my team. My wife's team is the Edmonton Oilers, and she's a more rabid hockey fan than even I. But we just like to watch good hocky. So.
Boston Bruins. Okay, original 6. I'm a Blackhawks fan.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. Chris Chelios and Jeremy Roenick when I was growing up. So
Blackhawks are going to be good again. So
Connor Bedard
is there, and they're a good team. It just takes a while to get. They're all good teams. That's the problem in the NHL today. Not problem, but the product is very good across the board. You don't know every night. You don't know who's really going to win.
Right. And even teams like Vegas, who just expanded a few years ago, just getting a cup, right? So, Seattle making it to the playoffs in their inaugural season. A lot of good things, not only in hockey, but in the whiskey world. Al, thank you so much for joining. Really a pleasure to have you on and learning more about Law's Whiskey House. And I hope my viewers and anyone joining in watching this enjoyed it just as much as I did. You're in downtown Denver. How do people find you?
Well, we're just outside of we're in South Denver, so we're like if you were staying downtown Denver, it'd be like 12 to 15 minutes south on Broadway. Our production facility and our new tasting room are on West Arkansas and Acoma, which is 1 block off Broadway. and our rick house, one of our rick houses, and our office is like across the tracks from there. But yeah, you want to come to the distillery, make the time and do a tour. Our tours are extensive, and you'll learn something no matter how much you know. There'll be something that you'll learn.
Well, I am actually personally planning on being in July there for a friend's wedding. So Laws is on the list. It might be my first stop the moment I get, once I get off the plane, then I got that whole shuttle into town, being that I know how Denver is. But once I get off of the shuttle, I know exactly where I'm going to be. Al, again, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Really looking forward to seeing what else you guys put out. Everything I've tried here so far is fantastic. Blessed that you guys sent me this care package. I will definitely continue to look out for more of, especially this Bottled and Bond 4-grain bourbon was fantastic. But thanks for joining me. And again, viewers, you guys can find more on Law's Whiskey House in the link in the description if you'd like to buy a bottle. As he mentioned, shipping to 36 different states. Al, thanks for joining the Whiskey Weather YouTube channel.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I had a great time.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. You can clearly see the passion and the love that Al has for bourbon, for whiskey, Colorado whiskey, maybe the weather and hockey. If you enjoyed that as much as I did, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button below. Smash that like button as well. It helps a lot more than you actually realize. So please don't forget to do that. And if there's a distillery you would like me to reach out to and try to talk to, interview, drop that in the comment section below. I'm going to try to get more and more of these distillery features right here on the Whiskey Weather YouTube channel. Remember, until next time, it is always Whiskey Weather. Just please, please, please remember to drink responsibly. Cheers, y'all. Have a great rest of your day.